Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. It's all about monsters and creating your own monsters today. We're going to make another monster. Got to have dragons at some point, even if they're little ones. Little dragons. And yeah, going to be an interesting process. I've been enjoying the process of actually making monsters for Shadowdark, which is essentially just Dungeons and Dragons. I have a poll, which feel free to take part in that poll if you want to. Grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and I think this will take me maybe 25 minutes to get through. Yeah, I'll show you what we can do and what you can do as well. Anyway, let's get going, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm talking about the version of Dungeons and Dragons called Shadowdark RPG, which is just a sort of a reimagining of 5e and basic D&D. You might say AD&D, but I think it has more in common with basic D&D than it does with AD&D. And yeah, we've been making a lot of monsters, and I thought it would be a good idea to do the Pseudodragon, because the Pseudodragon is not actually in the Shadowdark core rulebook. And the Pseudodragon would be one that you might probably want to use at some point. So let's make a stat block for it. That would be my go-to for doing something like this. So there are a lot of monsters in the core rulebook. Like there's over 200. They're all SRDs. Now you're also probably thinking, well, Fred, the problem is that I'm pretty sure the Pseudodragon is an IP dragon. Like it's not a dragon you can use. We'll rename it. We'll figure out how to rename it. I will find a way, but let's at least look at the concept of building it mechanically. Okay. Now, normally when I'm doing these live streams, I usually ask everybody how they would go about building it. I will show you the table I use and go through my rationale. So let me just grab that now, and here we go. So how would you build the Pseudodragon stat block for Shadowdark RPG? And that is my question to you. For those of you who do build your own stat blocks, but if you don't and you need help doing it, that's what today is all about. So for those of you who haven't figured it out, I'm on a bender. My bender is how can we help everybody make their own stuff? And the more we can help you make your own stuff, the better. So let's show you what I have, and then we'll go and have a look at what you've got. This project is in conjunction with AJ Pickett and Wally DM, for those of you who don't know. And if you look down in the description, you'll find a supplement for Shadowdark RPG, which includes classes and ancestries you can play. And that's the first one. Well, guess what? I've released a second one with Wally DM. So there is now another one. And the link is probably not down below because I ran out of time and I forgot to actually include it. And I was waiting for it to be released by DriveThru RPG, but it is on DriveThru RPG. And guess what? It's pay what you want again. There are 11 classes in this case. We'll talk about that at some other time. And yeah, about 16 ancestries. So you should have no problem having plenty of options for your Shadowdark game. Okay, so I'm not going to be covering lore. I'm going to go into the stat block. If you guys have got an idea for what you would call the Pseudodragon, if we can't use the name Pseudodragon because Pseudodragon is actually an IP name, it might not well be one. It just may be that Wizards of the Coast thinks it is. So Pseudodragon D&D, I'm just going to put here, it's probably just going to go Pseudodragon. Okay, so token size, blah, 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 blah. Origin. Where's the origin of it? Pseudodragon originated from Dungeons and Dragons lore as a miniature intelligent dragon-like creature, often serving as a familiar. Okay, so that apparently is the origin of the Pseudodragon. So if you can come up with a better name, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out later. Anyway, so I'll put question marks here. A small dragon can dragon-like. It's not a dragon-like, it's a small dragon with a playful grin. We can extend its extend here. A small dragon with a tail stinger and a playful grin. There you go. Cool. Right, the first thing we need to do is we need to determine what our monster's level is going to be for Shadowdark. And I have a table here. This table here breaks it down into levels and what the various numbers should be. This table is available on my Patreon on the free tier, so you don't have to pay for it. I want you to go and use it. Go download it if you don't already have it. So we have to determine what our monster level is going to be. So I'm going to go back to AD&D and the Pseudodragon. Since it seems to be that's where the origins are, I guess my biggest problem with the Pseudodragon is it is essentially kind of more like a tiny wyvern in many respects. When you think about it, it's like it's a tiny wyvern. So what I've noticed when I looked at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is the hit dice is 2. For me, I would suggest making this monster a level 2 monster for Shadowdark. That's if I'm looking at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, right? That's sort of one of my first go-tos is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. You can go maybe back to Basic and have a look there as well. The other option is to, of course, look at 5e, since a lot of the monsters in Shadowdark are to a large extent built around the mechanics of 5e, and of course 5e's mechanics are not very good, but I mean maybe you can do something with it, and we're going to have to use some of it anyway just because of the very nature of the game. There are certain things that 5e actually give you that other older versions of D&D don't, so we may actually have to use some of that stuff. So the Pseudodragon, Piercer, Pseudodragon, Pixie, there we go. It is only a challenge rating quarter, so it's really not even a threat. It's kind of like a waste of your time. It has been decided that it's going to be a familiar and really going to have no other real purpose other than that. There is no quarter level in Shadowdark. I'm going to go with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which is why I'm going to make it a level 2 monster for Shadowdark. And in terms of its alignment, well, basic, it's got it down as neutral good in 5e. And if I look at the alignment in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm going to try to take as much as I can from the older version of D&D rather than the newer version, it says neutral. It doesn't say good neutral or neutral good, it just says neutral. And since there are only 3 alignments in Shadowdark, lawful, neutral, and chaotic, we're going to go with neutral. So that's nice and easy. So we've got most of the bits and pieces to get ourselves started. Now the problem is I can't use ability modifiers or scores from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons because the stat block doesn't include them. I can't use 3.5 really in this case because it could be significantly different since the mathematics of that was very different, and Shadowdark isn't really based on 3.5 or version 3, and 4e is completely out of the realm of like usefulness, unfortunately. But we could go back to the likes of 5e and look at the stats there and just transfer across a lot of the things that are there. And since that's where it's got, you know, its origins in basic D&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and 5e, let's just go with the strength score from there. So we don't use the strength score, we're only going to use the modifier. So it says here strength is 6, so that's a -2, so we'll add that in. And we've got dexterity is 15, so that's the score. We want the modifier, we want +2, that's fine, got that. Constitution is a 13, so that comes out at a +1, so we've got that, we'll keep that. Intelligence is a 10, so we're going to keep that at a +0 for the modifier. Its wisdom is 12, so it's quite wise, so that's a +1, so we've got that one. And charisma is 10, so that is a +0. So all of our stats pretty easy to port over. It has a fly speed. This little monster has a fly speed of 60 feet in 5e and a movement speed of 15 feet. The problem is that 60 feet is kind of like double near in Shadowdark. And the full-blown dragons fly double near already. I think this little dragon needs to fly a bit slower. So I'm slowing it down significantly based on what I have seen in 5e. Instead, even if I look at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and I look at the sort of the how it works, I mean, it's got here, its movement is 6, which is kind of relatively close to normalish, so that maybe that's near. And then it's got 18, so it flies really fast. Again, I don't think I want to make this little dragon fly as fast as a full-grown dragon. Now, if you think that's a problem and it falls out of the narrative of what the Pseudodragon is, cool. Oh, actually, in fact, it's got here fly speed of 24. 6 and then it goes 24, so it's flies really quick. Again, I don't want to do that. I think that would be a bit much, so I've left it as near and fly. So near meaning it can walk that fast and it can fly that fast. Okay, I don't want it moving too much faster than that, and separating its movement outside of flying from being near and then flying double near would be cumbersome. So we kind of have to sort of shrink things down, make things easy for the game master. This is why I've designed it this way rather than another way, okay? Now, the next step is we need to look at how our armor class works. Now, armor class is descending at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so basic and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, different armor system. So we're going to have to fall back on something like 3.5. 4e is not going to be very useful. 5e, we'll use 5e, because we can probably get away with that. So the armor class with natural armor for 5e is 13. So we'll put 13 in. Now, will that work? Remember, armor class is determined by 10 plus your dexterity modifier and then plus whatever armor you have. So its armor class should be at least a 12 right now. That's fine. That's all good. We want natural armor. We don't want to give it too much natural armor. So a 13 would be fine. That works. We don't need to write in brackets natural armor because it's a monster, unless it's wearing leather armor or carrying a shield or something like that, or plate armor. We don't have to put anything like that in there, okay? It's not armor that you can take off the monster. It's not armor we need to equate, okay? It's just built in. Simplify things, don't get the stat block too complicated, right? So that's all good. Now, are we working within the parameters of a level 2 monster for Shadowdark? If we look at the armor class expected for a level 2 monster, you'll see anywhere between 7 and 16. It's big range. So we got 13. So that should be fine. Okay. The next thing is our ability score modifiers. The range is, whoops. Okay. Don't do that, Fred. Okay. The range is -4 to +3. So as long as none of our stats fall outside of that, which they don't, there's nothing lower than a -4, and we've got nothing higher than a +3. So all of our stat modifiers work within the parameters of a level 2 monster. Good, so we've got that sorted out. The next thing is hit points. How do we determine hit points? Well, it's going to be between 8 and 13, the average being 9, but there is a very specific way for calculating hit points in Shadowdark, and that is a D8, or 8-sided dice. Take the average of that, which is 4.5, multiply it by the monster level, and add the Constitution modifier only once. No matter how many levels there are to the monster, just like a character, you only add the Constitution modifier once, not for every single level of the monster. Okay? Otherwise, your numbers start getting crazy, and that's not what Shadowdark does. And since the characters are built the same way, the monsters are essentially built the same way as well. So that's pretty easy. We can figure that out. That's not hard at all. So if we have a look at our 4.5, multiply that by 2 is 9, And then our constitution modifier is +1. So 9 plus 1 is 10. So hit points is 10 for our monster. Perfect. Okay, we now need to determine how many attacks it's going to get and what those attacks are going to be, right? So let's go back to our table again. And the number of attacks that it should have at level 2 is between 1 and 2. It's a dragon. It's a little dragon, but it's still a dragon. So we're going to give it 2. We're going to give it a lot of attacks. But we're also going to give it a range of attacks. We're going to let it do a couple of different things. We're going to let it have a bite and use its stinger, rather than 2 bites or 2 stings. So we've got a bit of this and a bit of that going on. Okay, so we get to play around a little bit. And it kind of makes sense that it would probably engage its bite and stinger at the same time. I think that would be quite reasonable for this creature narratively. So let's have a look. Since we've got bite 1 bite, 1 stinger, so it's 1 bite and 1 stinger. And then what is our attack bonus going to be for our stinger and our bite? Well, if we look at our table for a level 2 monster, anything between a 0 and a 3 is a good number. I always recommend having the attack bonus be pretty much equal to the monster level. But we also need to have a look at its modifiers. So it's got a -2 modifier to its strength. So we're not going to be using its strength for its attacks. We're going to be using dex. Let's consider the stinger and the bite to be finessed, which makes perfect sense. If you can finesse a dagger, you can finesse a stinger and a bite. So we're going to go +2. And I'm going to go with a +3. We're going to go on the heavy end since it is a dragon. And we're going to give it at a +3 instead of a +2. So that still falls within the parameters. It's at the top end of it, but it's still there. Okay, so those are now you could make it a +2, you could make it a +3, and it will all be perfectly fine. But I would not go a +1 because the dex modifier is a +2. You go up, go equal to the dex modifier or up, but I wouldn't go down in this case just because of those stats, right? Okay, next. How much damage should we be doing? Well, level 2 monsters do between a D4 and a D6. Because I want to give it a poison effect, because it's got a stinger, I'm going to reduce the amount of damage it does. I don't think the bite should do a lot of damage, so I'm just going to give it a D4. You're going to get to do that. You're not going to have to choose. You're not going to lose out on using the bite. So like the bite's going to get used, the stinger is going to get used, because it says and. Okay, it's not or, it's and. So you do a bite, you do a sting. We're going to make the stinger a D4 as well, rather than D6, because I want to add in this plus poison effect. We want it to have some sort of effect if its stinger hits, does some damage, and then potentially poisons the target or the individual that's been stung. So that's what I want to do here. So it's all structured pretty much to work the way we need it to. Why did I not go with heavier damage? I decided that I thought this is the sort of dragon that it's a smaller dragon, so it's probably not going to be a heavy damage dealer, but it's probably quick enough and good enough at fighting, which is why I went higher on the attack bonus rather than a +2. And I thought, well, the poison effect is quite significant. Like it is a hard thing to sort of navigate when you start applying poison effects, particularly in Shadowdark, because they can be quite horrible. So here we go, poison. And I have used the same poison effect as other creatures within the Shadowdark. I've used the same parameters for this. So it's a DC 12 Constitution check or drop to 0 hit points for 1d4 rounds. Okay, so if you've got 4 hit points and you get hit by the poison, you drop to 0 hit points for 1d4 rounds. After that, you'll go back to your 4 hit points. Pretty simple. But for those rounds, you're down. You're on 0 hit points. You're out of commission, essentially. You're not in the fight. So yes, not something you want to have happen, but it's there. So it's not a poisoned effect that goes on forever. It is a temporary thing. You will recover, and relatively quickly. It's only 1d4 rounds, right? So it might be 1 round, might be 2, might be 3, might be 4. You don't know. Now I have pulled this from an existing monster in Shadowdark, and I usually use things like the giant centipede or the snake. You know, giant centipedes. Centipedes are probably one of my favourite ones to use. Now the centipedes, they use paralysis. I decided to avoid paralysis in this case and to go with dropping to 0 hit points for 1d4 rounds. And I believe that was based off what I saw AD&D was using in the first place. I'm like, okay. Now you could use a snake, you could use a spider, because they both have poison effects in Shadowdark. So for example, a spider, it does paralysis. Whereas something like the snake, spiders tend to, the paralysis thing, just like the centipede. But like a snake is a little different. So for example, if I can find it, here we go. Snake is, where are we? Yeah, here we go. Snake Swarm. Go to 0 hit points for 1d4 rounds, DC 12 Constitution. So I've utilized that mechanic. But you could use any one of those different poison mechanics, whether it's the snake, the centipede, the spider, any of those that you think sort of work, if you want it to work a particular way. So that's what I've done. Now there's another aspect of the Pseudodragon that I thought was important to include, and that is magic resistance. But it's got weird magic resistance. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to incorporate that in some way. And I didn't want to make this too complicated a monster either. So things like keen sense that 5e has, I've eliminated. No, we won't worry about that. It's not that important. But the magic resistance aspect goes right back to AD&D. So I've got here magic resistant, advantage related to checks against magic effects and one ally within near range. So it's very different to just affecting itself. It's also, if it has an ally within near range, which is about 30 feet, then it will also, that ally will also have that magic resistance advantage on related checks against magical effects. That's what I wanted to do. Things like limited telepathy sound fun. I don't know that I need to worry about tying that into the mechanics of the game. I mean, maybe you could if you wanted to, but I decided that I wouldn't worry about that. And that's kind of how I would go about building the Pseudodragon. And of course, we could extend and expand out sort of the lore section. We've got a description. We could have a little bit more information to sort of help refine it. But let's go and have a look at the chat and see what people have to say about how they would go about doing it. Oh, there's a lot of feedback here. Okay. I'm kind of interested to see what people have had to say. Would be nice. Witness protection, 4233. Hopefully you are well protected, witness protection. A Pseudodragon is really sort of like a mock or pretend dragon. It's not a proper dragon. It is dragon-like. So that's the concept of the Pseudodragon. Pseudo as being sort of placebo, fake. It's like the fake dragon. Like a bird or aven. Yeah, you could, I guess. Fledgling, wormling. The magic uses favorite familiar, especially before 2E. Definitely we want Pseudodragons. I'm sure we do. False dragon. I think that's probably right. False dragon. It's not really a dragon, but don't tell them or they will be upset. Yes, exactly. And so that would be probably the best name to include is false dragon. Fred Huber is a patron and a moderator, and you're right on the money. It is sort of a flying chameleon crossed with a scorpion. Yeah, kind of like that, yeah. What do you got here? It's a familiar name if after its handler's faction. Okay, all right. Pseudo. Adjective. False or counterfeit. Fake. I think false dragon is perfectly fine. I think that's right on the money, Fred Huber. I think you've got the right idea. Other than what it really appears to be. It's not really a dragon. Might have a bit of shit. You like to stick cats and everything, don't you? You like the snake from the Jungle Book? I, as a villain, I think the snake from the Jungle Book is one of the best ones. Hypnosis. yeah. Hypnotize them. Anyway, so that's how I would go about doing it and building it. We'll come back next week and do another Shadowdark monster. This monster is going to go up onto Patreon, like I do with all of them. I put all of these stat blocks onto Patreon. The Pseudodragon or False Dragon will go on the paid tier. Okay. Anybody who's paying some sort of money will get access to this, along with all the other monsters I've been making for Shadowdark as well. Getting closer and closer. AJ started drawing monsters again, so that's great news. He started drawing the Bollywog or the Toadies, so that'll be great once he has that artwork done. But we're aiming for 100 monsters, so it's going to take probably the rest of the year to get there. I will probably get the stat blocks done before that, but I think it will definitely take AJ Pickett a lot longer to get that done. We'll see how he goes. He's going to literally have to draw about 2 monsters every week to be able to get it done by the end of the year. Unless he looks at some of his older work, which he seems to be reluctant to do. I'll convince him otherwise. I'm sure I can get there. Anyway, so that's what I would do. That's where you're going to find it. Now, as I said before, the table that I use for making these monsters is here. Now, this is in the free tier. That means you don't have to pay anything, and you can go grab it and use it, and use that as a guideline for making your own monsters. Half of this is already in the core rulebook, but there's a whole lot of mathematics there that is not included in the core rulebook that will help you, guide you through that process so you know what you're doing. Okay? And it's nice and simple to follow. Now, next week, I'm going to be looking at the Mudman. The Mudman is quite a popular monster from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and it's been on my radar for a while. You could say it's just basically a mud elemental, but the Mudman will probably get changed to something else because it's probably IP again. But yeah, I wanted to have that, something like that, and yeah, we'll work on that next week. I'm going to end this poll. It's role-playing, not role-playing. Exactly. End that poll. Come on, end the poll. End the poll. There we go. Do you want a Pseudodragon in your Shadowdark game? Yes, 60% out of 5 votes. Undecided, 40%. Okay, well, now we know. So, for those of you who don't know, I was planning to make a revised, remastered monster manual for 5e, but I'm doing Shadowdark. Did that last year. I'll be continuing doing it this year, so that I can get sort of the vast majority of monsters you probably want that aren't in the Shadowdark core rulebook into a supplement that you can use. Yes, we'll be working on a lot of 5e stuff. Tomorrow I'm doing another podcast. It is kind of answering all the little questions people might want to know the answers to, and I'll do my best to answer those. That's what tomorrow's all about. But after that, the rest of my year will consist, unfortunately, of building a lot of Shadowdark monsters each week and building a lot of 5e stuff. Backgrounds, redoing the backgrounds, redoing the species, including showing you how to make your own backgrounds properly, how to make your own species properly for your 5e or 5.5 game, your 2024 game, and also classes. Wally DM had asked me to try to figure out how to make custom classes, custom species. I had figured out how to do custom backgrounds, and I think I've almost figured out. On the weekend, I figured out how to design custom classes. It's a bit involved because it's a class for 5e, modern D&D, and the species is also a little bit complicated. So bear with me. I'll do some live streams showing you how to do that yourself for those of you who are playing 5e. But if you're not playing 5e, don't worry. You're still going to get a lot of stuff for Shadowdark because it's one of my favorite games to play, and I got a lot of playtesting to do and a lot of writing to do, and I'm going to keep doing that because for some reason can't stay away. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Thanks for commenting in the chat. Witness Protection and Fred Huber. I do appreciate it. Thanks for taking part in the poll if you took part in the poll. Huge thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon and the paid tier. I really do appreciate you joining the paid tier. Without you, I really can't keep doing this. I'll just have to just disappear into the background. The good news is there are now 2 books that I have made out there that you can go and check out. And there will be more. Lots of 5e stuff this year as well. Not just Shadowdark. So, yes, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.